In this video, we're going to show you how to import the vectors and calculate the V-carving toolpath to cut the part you can see here. We're also going to show you how to make edits to the original object so that we can get the border you can see in this version too. This is a longer version of this tutorial where we're going to go into detail at each of the stages and steps to explain what we're doing and why. There is a shorter version of this you can watch if you want to see how this job would progress more in a sort of real-time environment and just see how quick and easy this would actually be to do without the detailed explanation. Let's start a new copy of the software. So we'll begin by clicking on the icon to open an existing file, and from the project folder we're going to select BullsHead.dxf and hit the open button. Now this is a vector file that's been created in another drawing program, and what the software will do when we open a file like this is automatically set the job size to be exactly the size of the largest object within the imported file. So here you can see this has picked up that value as a little bit over 10 inches and almost 4 inches. What I can do now is add additional material in order to make sure we've got space to cut out around the job and perhaps to hold the part down as well. So I'm going to enter a width or an X dimension of 12 inches for our material, and you can see if we wait a moment that automatically updates in the 2D view, and we'll enter the height of 5, and that's the Y dimension of our job. Now you can see we've added material on the top and the right there, and that's because our datum position is currently set to the lower left. We'd have added it equally on all edges if the datum position was set to the middle. We'll come back to this section in a moment though. Next we're going to set the Z0 position. This is the position we're going to reference on the CNC machine with the tip of the tool to tell the software that that is Z0. In this case, because we're V-carving, I'm going to set it to the top surface here because that's typically the best plane to reference from when we're doing something like a V-carve toolpath. So that's checked for the top. That's indicated by this red dot here. Material thickness is going to be 1/2 inch, so we'll make sure that value's entered in there. In the next section we specify the XY0 position. When we open a vector file like this, the software will try and automatically position it relative to the coordinates that it was saved from the original design system, and it does that by using this offset value to move the XY0 position. If I don't need to retain that original location, then I can just uncheck this as I'm going to here, and now you can see that XY0 has been moved to the lower left corner, and that's indicated by this red square in the 2D view and the two lines that you can see here. If we come over to the rule, you can see that's at 0 there, and this one is at 0 here. If I'm happy with that location, we can leave that. I'm going to work in inches, so I'll make sure that option is checked there. If I want to work in metric, then I can click the option here. I don't want to change the size of the job at the moment, so I don't need to worry about this, and I also don't need to worry about the modelling resolution for this job because we're not going to use any 3D components within this part. It's all going to be 2D data and 2.5D toolpaths. So once we're content with all that, we can hit the OK button. So that's now created our workspace. We've imported this vector, and currently it's located in the very lower left hand corner. What I would like to do next is position this in the center of the job. The first thing I need to do is select all the objects that I'd like to move. I can either do that dynamically by clicking on the objects in the 2D view like this. If I hold down the Shift key, I can select multiple objects, but we can see in this case I have a lot of different shapes that I want to pick. So another way of choosing is to box select. If I want to box select all the vectors here, I could click above the job and over to the left of it and then drag down so that everything I want to select is completely enclosed in the box. And when I let go, that's going to pick all those vectors. Another way I can select objects is to click and drag up from the right, and that will only select vectors that are that will select any vectors that are just partially touched by my selection box. So just to show that, if I drag up here from the right up to the left, then it'll just select the things that I overlap with that box. If I want to select every single vector in the part, another way to do it is to come up to Edit and come down and choose the Select All Vectors option. I could also hit Ctrl A on the keyboard as a shortcut for that. Now I'm going to click on the icon here to align these objects, align the selected vectors, and in this case I want to align them to the material, and I would like to align them simultaneously both horizontally and vertically. So I'm going to click on the middle one here, and that's going to move that into the middle of the part for me. And if that looks good, then we can go ahead and hit close. Now I would like to make some additional edits to the design for this job, but I'm going to do that in a moment. I'd like to show you just how quickly we could have gone to creating a toolpath for this here. If the design vectors are now the correct size and position, then it's just a case of coming up and clicking on the icon here to switch to the Toolpaths tab. When we click on that icon, it minimizes the Design tab on the left, maximizes the Toolpath tab on the right. This is where we can do our final material check, and we can also choose the type of toolpath we'd like to act with the vectors that we have selected. So first, the material setup. I'm going to come up and click on the Set button here. And what I'm doing is just verifying that the information that we entered before is correct for how I want to machine this. I could have just taken a quick check of this at the top of the form here, and as you become more experienced with the software, then it may be that you just come over, double check that all these values are correct and proceed into the toolpaths. Until you've been using it for a while though, it's always good to click on the Set button and just sort of manually work your way down the material setup form and check that everything is as you're going to set it up on the machine. So here I'm telling the software that I'm going to set Z0 off the top of the block, my material is going to be 1/2 inch thick, and the XY0 is going to be in the lower left hand corner when we indicate that on the CNC. I don't have a 3D object for this job, so I don't need to worry about this middle section. That'll be dealt with in the appropriate tutorials. And then I need to check the rapid gaps above the material. So these are values that are used for the tool to retract up to before it moves to the next position in the toolpath. So the main thing I need to ensure is that these are high enough that the tool will clear any clamping or any hold down method that I'm using. The home position is just a value that I enter to give the software a location to move the tool to before we start the cut. If everything in there looks correct, and you should always double check this, then you can hit OK, and now we're ready to choose the toolpath type that we'd like for this particular job. And before we do that though, I should mention that it's very important that if you plan to cut this part yourself, in order to test the software with your CNC, that you ensure that the values you enter for the toolpath and the tooling are safe and appropriate for what you have available, the material you're planning to cut, and the way that your machine operates. So the toolpath we're going to use for this is a V-carve toolpath. You need to ensure that your vectors are still selected so you can still see them as dotted purple lines in the 2D view. If not, go up to Edit from the drop down here and down to Select All Vectors again. So mine are already selected, so I can come up and click on the icon here for the V-carving. Now the start depth for my cut is going to be 0, so I can enter that there. So we're going to V-carve down from the surface of the material. I don't want a flat depth. As you can see, the previous time that I used this toolpath, I entered a flat depth. I'm just going to uncheck that. So if that box is not checked, then that is correct. That means that now the tool is going to go down as deep as it can get all the way to the point of the tool. And that will depend on the width of the vectors we're cutting and the angle of tool we're using. To choose our tool, I'm going to hit the Select button. That'll go into the tool database, and this is basically the library of tools that we have available. There's a default set that you'll see when you first load the software, but this is fully user configurable, so you should take the time to enter the tools that you have and values that are appropriate for them, and perhaps make multiple copies of the tools depending whether you use them for different materials or applications. Here I'm going to choose the 90-degree V-bit, so this is from the V-bit section of the tool database. If you can't see that, you may need to click on the little plus sign next to it to open that up. Now choose the 90-degree V-bit and hit OK. Now because we're not using a flat depth, the next few sections of the toolpath will be greyed out and we don't need to worry about them. I'm not going to worry in this job about my order or using the vector start points to enter the material with the tool either. I'm just going to let the software basically work on its default settings. So lastly, I need to come down and give this a name. So I'm going to call this V-carve V90, and that's just to give me an indication of the tool I'm using, and hit the Calculate button. Now you'll see as soon as it's finished calculating the toolpath, which was extremely fast, it automatically opens the preview toolpath form, as we can see on the right here, and it automatically puts me over into the 3D view, which is now in the main window. What I mean by a 3D view is that if I click and move the mouse, I can rotate this around and we can see our virtual block of material, and we can see this toolpath that's been drawn for us in that 3D view. So this literally represents the coordinates that the software is going to tell the tool to move to in order to carve out this part. Now while it's useful to see this drawn in the 3D view here, it's way more useful for me to see what it will actually look like once it's been cut, and that's what the preview function is for. The first choice we're going to make is what we want our material block to look like. So you could choose one of the materials from the drop down list here that closely represents the wood you're using, or there are some other preset options if you're using different materials. It's also possible to add your own images to this list as well. Here I'm going to choose cherry for this job. We'll stick at the moment with the machined area being the material colour, and we'll leave the animate preview and draw tool checked. If I wanted to speed up the preview, I could uncheck both of those, and what would happen is it would just show me the finished result rather than the journey to get there. So I'm going to use the speed control here. I'm just going to slow this down to start with so we can see more clearly how the tool's moving. We've got our toolpath we've calculated in the list here, and I'm going to click on the button now to preview selected toolpath. Now we can see that being animated, and you can see that kind of wireframe of the tool showing me what this is going to do when we output it to our CNC. Now there you can see the V-bit riding the rails of the vectors we've got, going as deep as it can into the wide areas and then pulling out into the thinner areas. If I want to speed this up, we can just move the slider to the right and it will go much quicker. As I say, if we wanted to go as fast as possible, if we just reset the preview, I could uncheck both of those, so preview selected toolpath, and it's almost instantaneous. So this can be very, very fast, but it can be useful to see how it gets there as well. So let's just check that value back on again there. Now we can see now the exact shape we're going to get in our material when we cut this on our machine. And this is so important because if this looks right, I now can with confidence save out the toolpath and run it knowing that it should look like this as long as I get all the setup correct on my CNC. If I see anything which isn't as I want it to be at this stage, now I have the opportunity to fix it before I've wasted any time or material in cutting this part. So very, very useful tool. Another nice feature in the preview here is I can add a contrasting colour to the area that we've machined. So if we come up here and say we want a global fill colour, and then I've got the drop down here, I can choose different colours. So here we've got kind of a gold colour in there. Then I can give the effect as if this was gilded, or I could pick another colour that represents maybe the paint that we plan to use in that area. This image that we've got here, as well as being useful to me to make sure the part looks correct, can also be a marketing aid. I can click on the button here to save the preview image. I can save that as a JPEG or variety of other image formats, and I could now send that exact image I can see here to my customer so they could approve it, or I could use it as images on my website or in a brochure or something like that, so I can show people the capabilities that we have with the CNC. So although we're explaining things in detail in this particular tutorial, you can see just how quick the steps would have been to open the data, center it, come over to the toolpath tab, check the material and calculate this toolpath. It all could have been done probably within about a minute of starting. Now what I want to show you is how we would save this out, so what the final stage would be. So once we are happy with the view that we can see in the preview, we can close the preview toolpath form, and the last stage is to put this data into a format my CNC will understand. I do that by selecting the toolpath, clicking on the icon here to save the toolpath, and then I'm going to make sure the toolpath to be saved is shown in the list here. If I can't see that, you may need to uncheck the box at the top. Then I'm going to choose what we refer to as a post-processor. Now this is a file that is on the system, and you can see there are hundreds of these files, and what each of those relate to is a particular type of CNC machine or the control software that runs it. So you need to find out what the appropriate post-processor is for your particular machine. And you can do that by asking the machine tool manufacturer or talking to Vectric support, but typically it's pretty straightforward to find what you've got in the list there. There are so many that most of the major machines are taken care of. I'm just going to use a generic G-code post here. I would hit the Save Toolpath button, give the file a name, hit save, and now that file would be on my hard drive. I can transfer it across a network or onto a memory stick and take it to my CNC, and once I've done my material and tooling setup on the CNC, I'll be able to carve the part that we can see there. So there we've seen the complete process from starting with some vectors to something that you can actually machine. I'm not going to save this machining file at the moment. I'll just go ahead and hit cancel. And what I would like to show you is how we could make edits to the data as well though. Here we've just taken the data, but quite often there may be things you want to change about it or items that you want to fix within it. Here let's make a simple change to the border shape. So I'm going to close the Save Toolpath form there, and what I want to do is come back to the Design tab and my Drawing view, the 2D view. So I'm going to click on the icon here which will switch back to the Drawing tab. So here we can see the Drawing tab, it's minimised the Toolpath tab, and up the top here I've got a 3D view, which is what we're currently in now with the preview of our material block, and next to it with the name of the file I've got the 2D view. So if I click on that we go back into our design view. Now I'm just going to click somewhere in the background to deselect those vectors. I'm going to click just on the inner rectangle here and hit delete on the keyboard in order to remove that. Next I'm going to select this outer border, and because this is a rectangle I can edit it with the Draw Rectangle tool. So with that selected I'm going to click on the Draw Rectangle icon. It'll pick up the values for that, and the first thing I want to do here is adjust the size of it. So I'm going to come in and I'm going to make this 11 by 4 inches there. Make sure the anchor point's set to the center here so that it will automatically scale this evenly around. And if I want to I could hit apply, and you can see that the size has changed now, that value has been changed. In addition though, I'd like to add a bit more interest to the corners. We could do an external corner perhaps, so if I enter a radius for that and hit apply I can round those corners. What I would like to do for this is an internal corner though, to give it a bit more of a kind of decorative old-fashioned look to the border. So radius internal, radius 1/2 inch, 11 by 4, apply and close. Next I would like to recreate the vector that we had offset from this but using my new shape. So I'm going to select this object again, come down and click on the icon to offset that vector, and we'll offset it inwards by 0.2 inches. I'm going to make sure Create Sharp Offset Corners is checked. I don't want to delete the original, so make sure that is unchecked, and I don't need to select a new vector in this case, so we can just hit the offset button and close, and there we've created a new vector offset from that one that we just edited there. So lots and lots of design tools available within the software, lots of tools to draw new shapes and lots of tools to make edits to any shapes that you've imported. Very, very powerful design section of the program that can be used in order to create from scratch or edit your artwork. Now once we've done this, it's very easy to just click on the icon here to switch back to the Toolpaths tab, and to reapply this toolpath is as simple as selecting it, clicking on the icon here to edit it, and you can see there that we have created a new vector that wasn't previously in the selection for this toolpath. So now what I want to do is just hold shift down and click on that vector there. The other vectors that are still available have been reselected, but holding shift and clicking that will add it to the selection. I'm going to take the same values we used before, hit calculate. The software's recalculated the toolpath. It's brought us back into the 3D view and opened the preview toolpath form, and I can see I've still got the preview showing from the toolpath that we had before. So I'm going to click on the button to reset preview, then I'm going to click on the button to preview the selected toolpath. That will now preview my new toolpath there, and we can see the result of that in the 3D view. And let's come up and click on the icon in the corner here to view down the Z-axis. And I can see that looks quite good, but the balance of where this is positioned is a little too much to the right, and that's probably because of this flourish that sticks out on the left here. Sometimes the mathematical centre is not really the visual centre of the object. Again, it's very easy for me to edit that if I want. We can close the Preview Toolpaths form, click on here to go back to the Drawing tab, click there on the bull's head to go into the 2D view. I'm just going to click in the background to deselect, and now I want to select all this middle graphic here. So I can either click and drag a box that completely encloses it, or if I start sort of down to the bottom right here, but inside these border vectors, I can click and drag up to the left and just make sure that I at least partially touch everything in the middle there so that these vectors become selected. Now I could either move these by specific value by clicking on the icon here to move the selected objects. So we could say move them relative to their current position, minus 0.25 in X, and hit apply and close. So that actually looks quite good. In addition though, if I go into transform mode, then I can move these dynamically, and sometimes that's easier to get something to look visually correct. To do that, I'm going to click on the icon here so that we can say move, scale, rotate, selection. That is the transform mode, and these handles will appear. Now it's very easy for me to just click there, and if I hold the shift key down, I can just drag this either horizontally or vertically in line. So may want to drag that horizontally there a little bit further across. In addition, we can scale this or stretch it as well by using any of these handles on the edge. So it may be that I actually want to stretch this out a little. I can click here and just drag in order to stretch that. And again, it's just really a totally subjective opinion as to as and when this looks correct. It may be we want to balance that out, move it over a little more, but the beauty of these dynamic editing handles is it's very easy for me to keep working with this until I like the layout that I have. Now we can click on the icon to go back to the Toolpaths tab. We can either select and hit the edit button, or I can double click on the toolpath to reopen it. I haven't changed any of these vectors, so even though we've moved them and resized them, the software will automatically add them to its selection again. I can hit the calculate button, we'll reset the preview once more, and then we'll do another preview of this third iteration of our design. So you can see the power of the software to go from calculating a toolpath, showing you what that will look like, coming back to the design, making edits to design, and then recalculating the toolpath. Very, very quick to keep iterating through different options until you've got something that's exactly right, and that's the time you know it's ready to save and cut on your CNC. So now, if we were happy with that, we could close the preview and click on the save, choose the post processor and save that toolpath and send it out and machine it. In this case, as I say, I'm not saving the actual machining files, but what I am going to save is the software file itself, and that'll save the vectors and the toolpaths that I've calculated so that I could open them at a later date if I wanted to make a variation on this or check the parameters that I'd used for it. To do that, I can come up to File and Save As here, and in the project folder we'll call this BullsHead _ toolpath, and hit the Save button. So you have the file exactly as you see it here, saved in the project folder if you want to open it and take a look at that. That concludes this particular tutorial. So here we've shown you a long version of this particular item. We've given a detailed explanation at each stage as we've gone along and talked about exactly why and how we're doing different things. There is a much shorter version of this tutorial just to show you in real time as you would work on it how quick and easy this process would be if you weren't getting into those detailed explanations. Thanks for watching the video.